Detective Kate Morgan pulled the squad car over to the curb and watched the Clarks' house for a few seconds, an unremarkable two-story structure with a neatly trimmed lawn and flower beds along the driveway, the kind of houses that stood all over Riverside, a typical American suburb where everyone knows everyone else, but prefers to stay out of everyone else's business. Kate sighed. 22 years on the force had taught her one thing: perfect facades often concealed the ugliest crimes. Police tape blocked the driveway to the parking garage. A patrol officer with a notepad was recording the statement of an elderly neighbor in a flowered robe. At the sight of Kate, he nodded and headed toward her. "Detective Morgan, the victim is Linda Clark, 53 years old." The officer checked the notes. "Found by her husband around 6 p.m. ME says death occurred between 2 o'clock and 4 p.m. Preliminary cause is strangulation." Kate pulled a rubber band out of her pocket and gathered her brown hair into a ponytail. It was her ritual before examining a crime scene, as if even hair shouldn't get in the way of seeing the truth. "Husband? Robert Clark, 55, manager at Prime Insurance. At first glance, grief-stricken. He's in the kitchen with a neighbor and Officer Jenkins." Kate crossed the lawn and entered the garage where the forensics team was still working. The body had already been taken away, but the chalk outline remained on the concrete floor. She squatted down, scrutinizing the spot where Linda Clark had been found. No sign of struggle, nothing to indicate resistance. An upturned plastic box lay next to the outline of the body. Scattered around were photo albums, old letters, some mementos. "Was she looking for something?" Kate asked the CSI who was dusting the shelf for prints. "Or someone was looking for something from her?" He shrugged. "It looked like a robbery gone wrong." The garage door was open, the victim's purse empty, no wallet. Kate didn't answer. Something wasn't adding up here. A burglar in a quiet suburb in broad daylight? And took nothing from the house, just the contents of the purse? She looked around the garage, too tidy for the place where the struggle had taken place. Only one box had been knocked over. If Linda had fought back, the mess would have been bigger. Kate frowned. Who was she trying to fool? In 22 years on the force, she'd developed a sniff for domestic violence. She'd seen stone-faced husbands who played the role of grieving widowers flawlessly. Could Robert Clark be one of them? But she shouldn't jump to conclusions. Kate stood up and headed toward the house. Robert Clark sat at the kitchen table with his arms around his head. An untouched cup of tea stood in front of him. A neighbor in a flowered robe was nearby, shifting cookies from place to place on a plate. She froze at the sight of Kate. "Detective Kate Morgan," Kate introduced herself, showing her badge. "Mrs. Parker, Dorothy Parker," the neighbor said. "I live across the street. It's a terrible tragedy. Robert was such a wonderful husband. He and Linda were the perfect couple. 30 years together. Never said a rude word to each other." Kate looked at Robert. Average height, balding, wearing a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. An ordinary man. The kind you meet every day and don't remember. "Mr. Clark, I need to ask you a few questions." Robert raised his head. His eyes were red but dry. "That doesn't mean anything," Kate reminded herself. "People react differently to grief." "Of course, Detective. I want to find whoever did this." His voice sounded steady. Too steady. Kate sat across from him. "Tell me about today. When was the last time you saw your wife alive?" "This morning before work, around 8 o'clock. I left for the office, came back around 6 and..." His voice shook. "Found her in the garage." "Did you call her during the day?" "Yeah, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. She said she was going to her flower store. She had the day off today, but she wanted to check on a new shipment." Kate marked it in her notebook. "We'll have to see if Linda was at the store. When you were talking, did you notice anything unusual in her behavior?" Robert thought for a moment. "No, although she did seem a little distracted. But Linda had been like that a lot lately. Said she was tired." "Tired of what?" "The routine, I guess." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. 30 years of marriage, you know. We were planning a second honeymoon for our anniversary next month." Something in his words caught Kate's eye. Was it fake? Or was it just her suspiciousness? She shifted her gaze to the wall where family photos hung. Robert and Linda against the backdrop of the Grand Canyon. Christmas. Some kind of family holiday. They were smiling in all the photos. The perfect American family. "Mr. Clark, did your wife have anyone who might have wanted to hurt her? Maybe a disgruntled customer at the store? Someone she had a conflict with?" Robert shook his head. Everyone loved Linda. She was a bright person. He had a real change in his face for the first time in the conversation. Pain? Guilt? Kate couldn't tell. "What can you tell me about her friends? Who she'd been hanging out with lately?" "She had a friend named Susan from the store. Sometimes they'd go to the movies or yoga. And Frank and his wife, our neighbors 2 houses down. We used to have barbecues on the weekends." Kate wrote down the names. She stood up and walked over to the refrigerator, where magnets with notes and old shopping lists were stuck. "May I?" she asked, pointing to the picture of Linda attached by the magnet. Robert nodded. Kate took the picture. Linda against the lake. The wind flutters her brown hair with graying. She's smiling. Not that formal smile for family photos, but a genuine happy smile. Kate scrutinized the photograph. The angle of the photo, the lighting, the composition, everything indicated that it was taken by someone standing very close to Linda. Not just a random passerby who had been asked to take a picture. Plus, in the background, you could see a plaid with the remains of a picnic. Clearly a date, not a family outing. Kate turned the photo over. On the back in faded ink was written, "To Linda with love." No caption. "It's a beautiful picture," Kate said, putting the photo back. "When was it taken?" "I don't remember," Robert answered too quickly. "Last year, I guess. We went to Lake Tahoe." Kate nodded, making a mental note. A blatant lie for 2 reasons. First, she'd grown up in the area and recognized the Place a City Lake in a park just 3 miles away, not Lake Tahoe in the mountains. Second, the photo showed Linda's very recent haircut. Kate noticed this by comparing it to the other family photos on the wall. Robert was lying, and probably knew more about the photo than he wanted to show. A few hours earlier, the day was clear and Linda dropped her sandals to walk barefoot along the edge of the lake. The cool water caressed her tired feet. She had always liked this place. Quiet, peaceful, no crowds of tourists or noisy families. There was hardly anyone here on a weekday. She turned around and waved to Brian, who was spreading a blanket on the grass. His dark hair glistened in the sun, and when he smiled back, her heart sank. So many years spent in a loveless marriage, and only now did she dare to choose her happiness. "Stop dreaming, beautiful," Brian shouted. "Dinner's getting cold." Linda laughed and headed towards him. Strangely, she felt younger next to him. Not 53, but like she was 25 again and had the whole world open to her. Brian set out sandwiches and fruit and opened a thermos of coffee. "It doesn't look like a restaurant, sorry," he said, handing her a sandwich. "It'll be better next time." "This is perfect," Linda replied sincerely. They ate in cozy silence, enjoying the moment. Then Brian gently took her hand. "Have you decided?" Linda knew what he was asking. They had talked about it more than once, about her leaving Robert and starting a new life, with him. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'll tell him tonight." "Are you sure?" Brian sounded worried. "He might." "What? Hit me?" Linda grinned bitterly. "Robert never used physical force. It's not his method. He just draining the life out of me." Slowly, day by day. Brian squeezed her hand tighter. "I'll be around. I can wait nearby while you talk to him." "No," Linda said firmly. "I have to do this on my own. For 30 years, I've let him control my every move. It's time to take responsibility for my life." She pulled out her cell phone and checked the time. She had to be at the flower store in an hour. "I have to go," she said regretfully. Brian nodded and suddenly pulled out his camera. "Wait, one photo to remember." Linda smiled, letting the wind play with her hair. She felt truly happy, perhaps for the first time in years. The phone rang as she was already approaching the car. Robert's number. Linda took a deep breath and answered. "Yes? Where are you?" Her husband's voice sounded deceptively calm, but she knew the tone. He was angry. "I'm on my way to the store. They're bringing in orchids for the Johnsons' wedding today. You haven't been answering your messages." "Sorry, my phone was in my bag," she lied. A pause. Linda could almost see Robert considering her answer, looking for a flaw in it. "I'll be back late. I have a meeting with clients. Good, she tried to sound nonchalant. I'll see you tonight then. You've been kind of weird lately, Linda. Her heart skipped a beat. Could he really be guessing? Just tired. A lot of orders at the store. Okay. I'll see you tonight. He disconnected, and Linda stared at the faded screen for a few more seconds. 30 years of this scrutiny, these interrogations and inspections. Tonight it would be over. She'd pack her bags and go to her sister's in Oregon. And then a new life begins. Kate arrived at Linda's Flowers around 7 in the evening. The small space was drenched in greenery and flowers. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 40s, with a short haircut and tear-stained eyes. Susan Wright, Linda's co-worker and friend, already knew what had happened. "I can't believe it," she said, wiping away tears. Linda was here today, around 3 o'clock. We were discussing the wedding booking. Was she alone? Kate asked. Yeah, stayed for about an hour and left. Said she had some things to pack up at home. Did she say what she was going to do afterward? Susan hesitated. Linda had been different lately. Happier or something, like she was younger. Did she have someone? Kate asked me directly. I don't know for sure, Susan shook her head. She never said anything straightforward, but yes, I think she had someone. She took a lot of time off in the middle of the day, started taking more care of herself. What about her marriage? Did she ever mention any problems with her husband? Susan faltered again. Linda rarely complained. She was generally very reserved, but sometimes she said things that made me think things weren't so rosy. One time she said, "You know, Sue, sometimes prison can be very beautiful, with flowers on the windows and pictures on the walls. But it's still a prison." Kate wrote this down in her notebook. Did she ever mention the name of her friend? No, Susan shook her head. But I know he's younger than her. One day she came in with a bruise on her neck. Susan smiled, embarrassed. You know how it is. I made a joke about it, and she blushed like a schoolgirl and said something like, "Men are so passionate at 29. 29. Kate made a note of it. Anything else? Maybe the place where they'd met? Sometimes she mentioned a lake. A city one in the park. Seems like they used to go there a lot. The lake from the photo. Kate said goodbye to Susan and went outside. It was getting dark, but she decided to drive over to the Clark house one more time. To her surprise, the forensics guys were still working there. One of them, Jim, with whom she often cooperated, waved her over. Found the victim's cell phone, he said, holding out a clear bag of evidence. Under one of the shelving units. Password is date of birth, 18770, day and month. Kate nodded gratefully, and putting on her gloves, pulled out her phone. Unlocking it, the first thing she did was check the messages. A few from Robert, from Susan, from some Sharon about ordering flowers, and a slew of messages from a contact labeled simply with a B. Can't wait till tomorrow. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Soon we'll be together forever. The last message was sent at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Are you okay? Text me how it goes. Kate looked through the pictures on her phone. Among the many shots of flowers and nature, she found a few selfies of Linda with a young, dark-haired man. They looked happy, in love. In one of the photos, they were by the very same lake. It was definitely one of that series of pictures hanging on the refrigerator. Who's this B? Brian? Ben? Bill? And where was he now? Kate felt a chill run down her spine. There were two scenarios. Either this mysterious B had killed Linda, perhaps she'd decided to end the relationship, or Kate looked toward the house, where Robert's silhouette was visible in the kitchen window. Her intuition leaned toward the second option, but so far she had no proof, only suspicion and a mysterious lover with the initial B. The morning rain drummed on the roof of the patrol car. Kate Morgan sat motionless, watching Linda's flower store. Susan had mentioned yesterday that she often came in an hour before opening time to prepare fresh bouquets. It was now 7 o'clock in the morning, and Kate hoped to talk to her again, without rush or extra ears. Susan's testimony from yesterday had kept Kate on her toes. At 29 men are so passionate, secret meetings by the lake, the bruise on her neck. And most importantly, Linda was going to do something about it the very day she was killed. Coincidence? Kate hadn't believed in coincidences for a long time. A figure with an umbrella appeared around the corner of the building. Susan, in a brightly colored raincoat, opened the side door of the store and disappeared inside. Kate waited 5 minutes and got out of the car, leaving the service umbrella on the seat. She preferred to look less formal when she was counting on the candor of a witness. The doorbell jingled. Susan turned around from the table where she was arranging fresh roses. "Detective Kate Morgan?" There was surprise in her voice. "Is something wrong?" No. Kate ran a hand through her wet hair. "I just wanted to ask a few more questions. Do you mind if I look around?" Susan nodded eagerly. "Sure. Would you like some coffee? I just made some." Kate agreed. And while Susan fiddled with the cups, she began to look around the back room. Tools for working with flowers, catalogs, and order folders were stored here. On a small work table was a photograph of Linda among the blooming lilies, apparently taken in the store. Young Linda smiled into the lens with a faint sadness in her eyes. "When was this store opened?" Kate asked, accepting the steaming cup. 15 years ago." Susan glanced at the photo. Linda had always dreamed of owning her own business. Before that, she'd worked in a bank and hated every minute of it. And Robert? Had he supported her decision to leave the bank? Susan pressed her lips together. You know, he never objected openly, always said the right words, smiled at the opening, but it seems to me... She fell silent, choosing her words. "I think he didn't like Linda having a life of her own. He preferred her to stay at home." "Why do you think that?" "Little things. Constant phone calls throughout the day, unexpected visits to see how she's doing, constant questions about male clients. He always had his finger on the pulse, you know?" Kate understood. Controlling behavior disguised as caring is a classic sign of an unhealthy relationship. "Did Linda have some personal item she kept here? A diary, maybe? Something Robert wouldn't find at home?" Susan wondered, rubbing the large jade pendant around her neck absent-mindedly. "She had a notebook. She sometimes wrote in it when she thought no one could see. She usually hid it behind a large palm tree." She pointed to a corner of the room. Kate walked over to the indicated spot. The heavy ceramic tub stood on a wooden stand with wheels. Kate moved it carefully and found a loose piece of baseboard. Behind it, in a small niche, lay a shabby, cloth-covered notebook. "May I?" Kate asked, though she was already holding it in her hand. Susan nodded. Kate opened the notebook carefully. The first entry was dated almost 3 years earlier. 27 years old today, sometimes I wonder, will my whole life go like this? R criticized my new sweater again. Said such colors were inappropriate at my age. Threw it away when he left for work. Why argue over nothing? It's a great day at the store. Sold all the bouquets for the conference. Kate flipped through the pages. The entries were irregular, sometimes a few pages a day, sometimes a break of months. But gradually, an unsightly picture was emerging. R says I spend too much on the store, that it's a hobby, not a business. I showed him the accounting. We're in profit for the second year. He just nodded and said, "Lucky you." I hate it when he devalues my accomplishments like that. Got into an argument over a family dinner with his coworkers. I forgot to buy R's favorite cheese. He didn't yell, no. Just made remarks all evening about my forgetfulness and thoughtlessness. The guests laughed. Felt like a complete idiot. As Kate continued to read, the chronicle of psychological abuse unfolded before her. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but constant. Robert had never laid a hand on his wife, but he had methodically, year after year, undermined her self-esteem, controlled every aspect of her life, and isolated her from her friends. And then, about 8 months ago, the tone of the notes began to change. Met a client who ordered a bouquet for his mother, so sincere, open. We talked about flowers for almost an hour. He listened with real interest, not like R, who always looks over my head when I talk about my work. B stopped by today for no reason. Just brought coffee and croissants. Said he was in the neighborhood. We talked about books. He likes the same authors I do. It's strange. I'd forgotten what it's like to be spoken to as an equal. The name B began to appear more and more often. Kate turned the page and saw an entry dated only a month earlier. Feeling alive for the first time in a long time. B says life doesn't end at 50, that I deserve to be happy. Strangely, I'm starting to believe him. Today we kissed by the lake. I feel like I'm back in my youth. R doesn't notice anything, or pretends not to. He's been looking right through me for a long time. The last entry was made 2 days ago. It's decided. I can't live like this anymore. 30 years is enough time to realize that some mistakes can't be undone. You can only stop making them. I'm packing the essentials, going to Cheryl's in Oregon. B says he'll follow in a week. I'm scared, but I have to do it. I'll tell R tomorrow. I hope he'll understand. Deep down, he's probably not happy with me either. She didn't say she was going to leave her husband, Kate said quietly as she closed her notebook. Susan shook her head. No, but I guessed. She's been more determined lately. Asked me how to set up a separate bank account, wondering if she could run the store remotely. Who's Cheryl? Her little sister. Lives somewhere on the Oregon coast. They're not really close as far as I know. Kate put the notebook in the evidence bag. What about this B? Have you ever seen him? A few times. Susan nodded. Tall, dark hair. Works as an auto mechanic at the Quick Wheel shop on Maple Avenue. He started coming into the store all the time. Quick Wheels, a lead. Kate thanked Susan and walked out into the rain, which only intensified. It was time to pay a visit to one more person in Linda's entourage. Frank Wilson, the Clark's neighbor, happened to be home, a trucker's day off. A heavyset man with a red face and a bushy mustache let Kate into the cluttered living room, immediately offering a beer. No thanks, I'm on duty, Kate declined, taking a seat on the edge of the couch. I'm not on duty, Frank chuckled, opening the can. Living to 56, I've earned the right to drink beer in my living room at any time of day, haven't I? He took a big gulp, and Kate realized that this can wasn't the first one he'd had today. Well, sometimes alcohol loosens tongues. Were you close to Robert and Linda Clark? She started out straight. Robert and I have been friends for about 10 years. We watch baseball together, sometimes go fishing. Linda, she was a good woman. Quiet, always working on those flowers of hers. How would you describe their marriage? Frank scratched his chin, looking past Kate. It looked okay from the outside. They didn't fight like some people did. Rob had always been polite to her. You know, opening the door, handing her coat, old school. But? Kate nudged him, sensing he wasn't telling the truth. Frank finished his beer and opened the next can. Look, I don't want to sully Linda's memory or speak ill of Robert, but there was something wrong. It was like they were acting in front of an audience. In what way? Last year, my wife and I invited them over for a barbecue. Robert got held up at work, so Linda came alone, and, she was, different, laughing louder, telling stories. And then Robert came over, and she just kind of shut down. She was so quiet, looking at him all the time, checking his reaction. It was creepy, to be honest. Kate nodded, encouraging him to continue. And then a couple months ago, I saw her with some guy, a lot younger than her. They were sitting in a cafe on the other side of town. I was driving by in my truck and I saw them through the window, holding hands, laughing. I didn't say anything to Bob, of course. None of my business, but she looked, happy. Really happy. Do you think Robert might have known about her, friend? Frank finished his second can and took a third. Robert's not the type to let himself be taken by surprise. He's very observant. He notices the little things. When we play poker, he always knows who has what cards just by the look on his face. Can't hide a damn thing from him. Do you think he could have, hurt her? Frank finally looked directly at Kate. Robert? No, I don't think so. He's always so reserved. In 10 years, I've never once seen him get really angry, although he's thoughtful. I once saw him deal with a neighbor's dog who'd ruined his flower bed. That was the other side of Robert. Cold, calculating. He didn't yell, he didn't kick the dog. Just talked to the owner, and the next day there was a fence there and the dog was coming around his house a mile away. I don't know what he said, but it worked. Kate made a note in her notebook. Quiet. Controlling people can be the most dangerous. They don't blow up. They don't make a scene. They just do what they think is right. One more question, Mr. Frank Wilson. Do you know a car mechanic by the name of... She paused, remembering an initial from her notebook. Brian? Works at the Fast Wheel, perhaps? Brian? Frank raised his eyebrows. Of course I do. He services my pickup truck. Nice guy, though he's young. Is he in some kind of trouble? No, just a routine survey. Kate stood up. Thanks for your help. As she left Wilson's house, she could feel the puzzle slowly coming together. The next stop was Quick Wheel. The auto shop was located in an industrial area of town. 3 mechanics were tinkering with cars in open garage boxes, but the young, dark-haired guy wasn't among them. Looking for Brian Taylor, Kate said to the nearest man in soiled overalls. Not working today, he mumbled, keeping his eyes on the carburetor. Called in this morning, said he was sick. How long has he worked here? About 5 years. Who are you exactly? Kate showed her badge. Detective Morgan, do you have an address or a phone number for Brian Taylor? The mechanic wiped his hands with a rag. First, tell me what this is about. Brian's a good kid. I don't want him in trouble. He's not a suspect, just a witness, Kate partially lied. It has to do with a client of your shop, Linda Clark. Oh, the lady from the flower shop? The mechanic nodded. Brian worked with her a lot. Her car was always breaking down. What happened to her? She died yesterday. The mechanic's face changed. Shit. Wait a minute, he frowned. Brian was weird yesterday. He left in the middle of the day, said he had an emergency. Came back a couple hours later completely white. Then today he called in sick. Does that have anything to do with it? Maybe, Kate said evasively. I really need his address. We'll just talk. The mechanic reluctantly dictated the address and Kate headed for her car. Brian Taylor, 29 years old, car mechanic, Linda's lover, and he was clearly avoiding the police. A person of interest in a murder case. Maybe a witness, maybe a suspect. Either way, he had to be found. Brian lived in a modest studio apartment above a Chinese restaurant on the edge of town. Kate rang the doorbell, but no one answered. A neighbor on the landing, an elderly Asian woman, reported seeing Brian leave with a bag early in the morning. Where to? She didn't know. Kate left her business card at the door with a request for contact and returned to the station. There was new information waiting for her. The preliminary coroner's report confirmed strangulation as the cause of death. No signs of sexual assault or robbery. Time of death between 16 and 17 hours. Robert Clark claimed to have been at work until 6 p.m. that had to be verified. Kate called the office of the Prime Insurance Company and learned that Robert had indeed worked that day, but had left to meet a client around 3 in the afternoon and never returned. This coincided exactly with the time period when the murder took place, between 4 and 5 in the evening. That's interesting. Very interesting. Linda carefully folded her favorite sweater into her travel bag. It was the beginning of 5 in the evening. She had to act quickly. She had no more than an hour before Robert returned. She needed to take only the essentials. The rest could be bought later, or she could ask her sister to send them. It was just a shame that her personal notebook remained hidden in the flower store. Those pages were her personal chronicle, proof of what she'd been through. Perhaps someday she would write a book about it, about a woman who lived someone else's life for 30 years and then dared to start her own. She pulled a jewelry box out of her dresser with the few pieces of jewelry that were truly dear to her. Earrings given by her mother, a simple silver bracelet from her first college friend. She'll leave her engagement ring on her dressing table with a short note. I'm sorry, it's best for both of us. It's best for both. Linda heard the rain begin to fall, drumming on the garage roof. Perfect weather for ending one life and starting another. There were a few more pictures missing, the ones of her with her parents and sister. Linda remembered that she had left them in a box on the top shelf in the garage. She left the bedroom and quietly walked down the stairs. The garage was cool and smelled of machine oil. Linda turned on the light and walked over to the metal racks in the far corner. They held old things that she didn't need in her daily life, but it was a shame to throw away. Photo albums, holiday decorations, her nephew's children's crafts. She reached for the top shelf, fumbling for a cardboard box labeled photo. Clumsily catching the edge, she pulled it down, and the box moved out abruptly, falling to the floor. The lid flew off, and the contents scattered across the concrete floor. Linda sank to her knees, hastily gathering up the photos and letters, and then she heard it, the slight creak of the door. Turning around, she saw a familiar silhouette. "What are you doing here?" she asked, straightening up. "I guess I should ask the same question." Robert was standing in the doorway, still wearing the same white shirt he'd left for work in. Only the tie was loosened, and there was something new in his eyes. something Linda had never seen before. "I was just looking for old photos," she lied, feeling her hands tremble. "With the travel bag?" Robert nodded toward the front of the house where the half-assembled bag she'd left in the hallway stood on the floor. Linda was silent. The words stuck in her throat. "You're leaving me." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "Robert, I'm—" "To him? That kid who fixes cars?" Robert's voice remained frighteningly calm. Linda felt a chill run down her spine. He knew. All this time, he'd known. "How long ago?" she asked. "Almost since the beginning." Robert walked into the garage, closing the door carefully behind him. "You think I don't notice when my wife changes? New clothes, a new haircut, a new twinkle in her eye. I saw it all, Linda. I was just waiting to see if this was just another one of your crushes." "It's not a crush," Linda said firmly, feeling her resolve returning. "I'm leaving, Robert. Our marriage died years ago. We both know that." 30 years, he said quietly, taking a step forward. 30 years I've been the perfect husband, provided for you, let you open that stupid flower store, never laid a hand on you, and this is your thanks? Perfect? Linda grinned bitterly. You controlled my every move, decided what I wore, who I was friends with, how I lived my life. This isn't a marriage, Robert. It's a prison. I loved you. There was finally some emotion in his voice. Everything I did was out of love. That's not love. That's possessiveness. Linda looked him straight in the eye. Now back off. I'm leaving. She moved toward the door, but Robert stood in her way. To his place? His voice was quiet again. What can he give you, Linda? Sex? That's it? You're trading 30 years of marriage for a fling with a younger man? He gives me the freedom to be myself, Linda answered simply. And yes, I love him. Now please step back. Robert's face changed. The mask of restraint he'd worn for 30 years had cracked, revealing what lay beneath. No, he shook his head. That won't do. You're my wife. I won't let you destroy everything we've built. We haven't built anything, Robert. It's always been just your world with me as a stage set. Linda tried to step around him, but he grabbed her by the shoulders. 30 years of our marriage wasted? Is that what you're saying? Let me go. Linda felt real fear for the first time. I'm not kidding, Robert. You're not going anywhere. His fingers clenched tighter. We'll talk. I'll explain everything. You'll realize we're meant to be together. I've finally found true love, Linda said firmly, trying to pull free. And I'm leaving. If not now, then tomorrow, or a week from now. But I'm still leaving you, Robert. It's over. Something changed in his eyes. Something finally broke. Robert's hand slid to Linda's neck. No, he whispered. It's only over if I let it be over. Linda tried to scream, but could only wheeze as her husband's fingers squeezed her throat. Chapter 3. Payback. The morning of the third day of the investigation greeted Kate Morgan with fog and light rain. She was barely awake, going over the evidence and witness statements in her head. Everything pointed to Robert Clark, the lack of an alibi, his controlling behavior described in Linda's notebook, the fact that his wife's adultery had hardly escaped his attention, but there wasn't enough direct evidence to convict. Brian Taylor had to be found, and Kate knew where to look. The roadside motel was 15 miles out of town, on the highway leading to Oregon. That was where Susan had said Linda was going to go, to her sister's place in Oregon. If Brian really loved her, he might still be planning to go there as they'd agreed. Kate parked not far from the registration office. The young woman behind the counter reluctantly pulled away from her manicure when Kate showed her badge. Dark-haired guy, early 30s, probably checked in yesterday or the day before. Kate placed a picture from Linda's cell phone on the counter, showing Brian's profile. The woman cast a distracted glance at the photo and suddenly perked up. Ah, the handsome guy from room 12, paid 3 days in advance cash. Kate thanked her and headed for the number. The door to room 12 was ajar, with soft music coming from the room. She knocked. Come in, came a husky male voice. But Brian Taylor was sitting on the edge of the bed, his hands in his disheveled dark hair. 2 empty bottles of whiskey and a pack of cigarettes stood on the table in front of him. The room was in semi-darkness because of the curtains. Brian's clothes were crumpled, as if he'd slept in them. His face was drained and pale since the last photo with Linda. He looked up at Kate and grinned. The police. Finally. Brian Taylor? Kate closed the door behind her. Detective Kate Morgan. We need to talk. About Linda. It wasn't a question. Yeah. Brian lit a cigarette, took a deep drag and blew the smoke toward the ceiling. I didn't kill her, he said simply. You can check my hands, my clothes, this place, anything. I didn't. I couldn't have. Kate studied him closely. The eyes read not so much pain as impotent rage. There was nervousness in her movements, but not fear of exposure. Her intuition, honed by years of work, told her that Brian was telling the truth. Tell me about your relationship with Linda Clark. He put out the cigarette he'd barely started and immediately lit a new one. The day I went into her flower store, I needed a bouquet for my mother for her birthday. Linda helped me pick out something special, not like everyone else's. She talked about flowers as if they were living things, with such... He paused, searching for the word. Passion. Then I went back to thank her. I brought her coffee. We talked for 2 hours. He stopped talking, staring at nothing. You know what struck me? She was interested in what I was saying. Really interested. I grew up in foster care. I work as a mechanic. Not the most impressive background. But she listened to me like I was telling the most important story in the world. Kate noticed a framed picture of Linda on the bedside table, the same one that hung on the Clark's refrigerator. You've fallen in love with her. Brian grinned bitterly, like a schoolboy, with a woman 24 years older. Ridiculous, isn't it? And then I realized that she felt something for me too, and that she was unhappy, really unhappy with her perfect life with her perfect husband. Tell me about Robert Clark. Brian's face tensed. At first, all I knew about him was what Linda told me. Little things. How he criticizes her clothes, how he checks her cell phone, how he reminds her of her failures in front of other people. He paused, and then I saw him up close. Kate waited for him to continue without interrupting. 2 weeks ago, I walked into Linda's store. She was with a customer and I was waiting in the back. And then he walked in, this Robert. Impeccable, expensive suit. He didn't see me and I saw him very well. You know what he did? He walked up to her and fixed the brooch on her blouse. A common gesture, right? But the way he did it, it wasn't the touch of a loving husband. This was a possessive man checking out his possessions. Brian took another drag. When the customer left, Robert started asking her about the day's earnings, about suppliers, about some invoices, smiling all the time, talking softly. But Linda... His voice trembled. She seemed to shrink with every word he said. She responded like a student to a strict teacher. He nodded and touched her arm or her hair casually, like he was checking to see if she was still there. It was. Creepy. Was she afraid of him? Not just physically. He kept her in a psychological cage. It was all for her own good. That's what he told her. He knew best what flowers to order, what car to drive, who to be friends with. Even the damn haircut was his decision. Brian pounded his fist on the table. I'm sorry, it's okay, Kate replied calmly. What happened the day Linda died? Brian lowered his head. His shoulders slumped. We met at the lake. She'd finally decided to leave him. She was going to go to her sister's in Oregon, and I was supposed to be here in a week. He looked up at Kate, his eyes inflamed with sleep. You know what she said? I've wasted 30 years living someone else's life. I don't want to waste another day. I offered to go with her right away, but she refused. She wanted to do everything on her own. There was desperation in his voice. I should have insisted. I should have been there with her. Then what happened? We said goodbye. She went to the store and then she was going home to get her things. I sent her a message. Are you okay? Text me how it goes. I didn't hear back. I didn't think she was busy packing or talking to her husband. Then I saw the news of her death on a local social networking group. He swallowed. I drove to the Clark's house. Just sat in the car opposite, watching. Saw the police. Saw them taking her away, her. Saw him, that bastard, stone-faced. Why didn't you go to the police? What was I supposed to say? Hello, I'm the murdered woman's lover. I suspect her husband. Brian shook his head. I was scared. For myself. For my part in all of this. If it hadn't been for me, maybe she never would have decided to leave, and she would still be alive. Kate was silent, giving him a chance to speak. I know he did it, Brian said in a muffled voice. I know it here. He pressed his fist to his chest. That's why I came here, so I wouldn't do anything stupid, so I wouldn't kill him with my own hands. Kate looked at him carefully. There was sincerity in the guy, but there was also restrained rage. She recorded his statement and took a DNA sample for exclusion, then asked him not to leave the motel for a few days and returned to the station. By noon in Kate's office, all the evidence was lined up on a whiteboard. Robert Clark's lack of an alibi, his lies about his whereabouts, Linda's notebook describing years of psychological abuse, Susan and Frank's testimony about Robert's controlling behavior, Linda's intention to leave her husband, an expert psychologist who, after reviewing the materials, confirmed the classic domestic violence scenario. Particles of fabric under the victim's fingernails that matched Robert's shirt. The police captain, an older man with tired eyes, knocked on the door and walked in. Kate Morgan, you have enough for an arrest. Go get him. Kate nodded. On my way. A strange feeling accompanied her on the way to the Clark house. Not the triumph of a solved case, but a heavy, oppressive sadness. She thought of Linda, of the 30 years of slow decay in the golden cage, of the timid happiness she had found at the end of her life, and of how it had all been destroyed by one act of possessive violence. Robert Clark opened the door almost immediately. He looked impeccable. Ironed shirt, neat haircut, the calm face of a grieving widower. Only his eyes gave away the tension. Detective Kate Morgan. He nodded. Any news? Mr. Clark, I need you to come with me to the station. He tensed subtly. Why? I've already given my statement. We have some new questions. Robert looked her straight in the eye, as if assessing how much she knew. Of course, Detective. I want to help the investigation. Give me a minute to get my jacket. At the station, Kate led Robert into the interrogation room. The captain was waiting there. The interview was being recorded. Mr. Clark, where were you the night of the murder, between 4 and 5 o'clock? I already told you, Robert answered calmly. At work until 6 in the evening. Kate laid the printout of the call from the insurance company's office on the table. Your colleagues claim that you left around 3 o'clock in the afternoon to meet a client and never came back. Do you have an explanation for this discrepancy? Robert's face remained impassive, only a thin vein protruding from his temple. I was in a meeting with a client, and then I stopped by the cafe to work on some paperwork. I guess I was inaccurate about the office. What cafe? Lorna's on Oak Street. Did anyone see you there? I don't know. I didn't talk to anyone but the waitress. Kate saw that he was lying. She started to press him. We'll check your word now. Our officer will go there. But let's try again, Mr. Clark. Where were you at the time your wife was murdered? Robert started to get nervous and confused. I guess I got confused. I was at a different cafe. Which one? I don't remember. Someplace on the way home. Kate put out Linda's notebook. We found this in your wife's flower store. Did you know she kept a diary? Robert cast a fleeting glance at the notebook. No. It described years of psychological pressure from you. Control, manipulation, isolation, classic signs of domestic violence. It's all an exaggeration. Linda was very emotional. I was just taking care of her. Kate opened the folder of photos of Linda and Brian from her phone. Did you know about her affair? Robert's face twitched, giving out a real emotion for the first time. Anger. What Linda did was her own business. I had no control over her personal life. That's an interesting answer, Mr. Clark. Not, no, I didn't know, not, that's impossible. It's her personal business. So you knew? Robert was silent. We took a tissue sample from under Linda's fingernails. She fought back desperately as she was being strangled. And guess what? The DNA and fibers match your shirt that you had dry cleaned the day after the murder. Kate watched Robert's reaction carefully. That doesn't prove anything. His voice remained cold. We live together. Her DNA can be found on all my clothes. Mr. Clark, we know Linda was planning to leave you, packed her bags, bought a ticket to Oregon, planned to start a new life, without you. Robert grinned suddenly. Without me? She's nothing without me. 30 years I'd spent building her up, molding a rough girl into a real woman. Everything she has is because of me. So you admit you controlled her? Robert seemed to wake up. That's not what I meant. I was just taking care of her, guiding her. When did you learn of her plans to leave? I didn't... Don't lie. Kate raised her voice for the first time. You knew. That's why you came home earlier than usual. Caught her packing. You couldn't let her leave, could you? There was a heavy silence in the room. Robert stared at the wall behind Kate. Mr. Clark, we have enough evidence to prosecute. We know what happened. You can ease your fate with a clean confession. Robert raised his eyes to Kate. There was no remorse or fear in them, only a strange, cold clarity. She was my wife, he said quietly. 30 years. No matter what we went through, we were a family. And she decided to throw it all away for a fling with a boy. He spoke louder and louder. You know what she said when I asked her if 30 years of marriage meant anything? She said, they were wasted years. I finally found true love. 30 years were lost years. His hands clenched into fists. I didn't plan it. Didn't think. I just wanted her to shut up, to stop saying those horrible things. I loved her. You strangled her, Kate said quietly, because of your wounded ego. Robert suddenly calmed down. You can call it whatever you want, detective. It doesn't matter. Robert Clark, you're under arrest for the murder of Linda Clark, Kate said, rising. You have the right to remain silent. The door to the interrogation room rattled open. Brian stood on the threshold, pale, gun in hand. Kate didn't have time to react as he raised the weapon and pointed it at Robert. You! One word full of hate. Brian, no! Kate shouted, trying to shield Robert, but it was too late. The first bullet hit Robert in the shoulder. He jerked back, staring in surprise at the blurred red stain on his shirt. The second bullet struck him in the chest, a third, a fourth. Kate and the captain rushed toward Brian, but he kept firing even as Robert had already fallen to the floor. 6, 7. The shots rattled the small room until the magazine was empty. 17 bullets. Brian put all his pain and rage into it. When he was finally twisted, he didn't fight back. He just sank to his knees, dropped the gun, and wept. Brian Taylor's trial began 3 months later. Kate testified as a witness, recounting the investigation, Linda's notebook, Robert's confession. She stuck strictly to the facts, but something in her voice made the jury listen especially closely when she talked about the 30 years of quiet domestic violence Linda had endured. Brian's lawyer had argued for effect, for emotional distress after losing the woman he loved. The prosecutor insisted on premeditated murder with particular cruelty. The 17 shots were no accident. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned with their verdict, there was a ringing silence in the courtroom. Guilty of manslaughter was the compromise. 7 years in prison instead of a possible life sentence for first-degree murder. The court considered the history of psychological abuse Linda had suffered, Robert's confession, and the state of affect Brian was in as mitigating circumstances. As he was being led away, he met Kate's eyes for a moment. There was no joy or relief in them, only the emptiness of a man who had lost everything,